Hello learners, good afternoon. This is Dr. Sunita Dhal, faculty with the School of Gender and Development Studies. I am also the program coordinator for the certificate program in Gender and Science. Today, we are going to have an induction session with all the registered learners for the certificate program in Gender and Science. Also, I would like to mention that the three courses, that is BGS 002, BGS 003 and BGS 004, which are part of the certificate program in Gender and Science, are also there in the program that is BA in Gender Studies. Therefore, any learners who would like to, who had already registered for the BA Gender Studies program can also benefit from this particular session, because we are going to discuss in this session some of the key points related to these three courses, that is BGS 002, 3 and 4. With this, let's begin the session. So you can always look at, you can always think of how gender and science are together. And this particular program was conceptualized by the school in the year way back in 2010. When in the today's context, we are talking about interdisciplinarity and multidisciplinarity. However, in 2010, the School of Gender and Development Studies were conceptualizing some of the interdisciplinary courses, or I would say programs, related to gender and science. And why the school thought of having a certificate program in gender and science, under which background that the program was conceptualized. So one of the important questions that also which is there in the course introduction of the program introduction is that how the growth of modern science and its culture and practices have been patriarchal in nature or androcentric in nature, because there is a male dominance in the context of the growth of modern science way back in the West, when we are talking about the period of Renaissance or the period of Enlightenment. Because modern science is both positivistic and patriarchal in its origin. By making objectivity as the essential criteria for the growth of scientific fact, it has naturally excluded all other forms of knowing or the knowledge construction. Therefore, feminists have offered an alternative view of science, which is theorized in the concept of standpoint theory. So, what is standpoint theory? That standpoint theory locates women's experiences as a valid source of knowledge in the construction of knowledge or in the process of knowledge production. When we are looking at, like, in recent years, you could see that even in the look at the global data in terms of women's participation in science. So also in Indian context, the women's participation in science career and education is far better when we compared it to some of the, Western countries. So in recent years, women's access to STEM, that is STEM education, that is science, technology, engineering, mathematics and medicine, has been debated in the international platforms. Like we have the Sustainable Development Goal, SDG, where clearly it has been spelled out how to bring about gender transformation or gender inclusivity, unless and until we encourage the participation of women and girls in science education and career. So therefore, to bring about gender transformation at the grassroots level, it is very important to make women inclusive of the scientific institution, practice and its culture or establishment, I would say. In India, feminist scholars, gender scholars, gender researchers have come up with recommendations to improve women's participation in science. Not only gender scholars have come up with recommendations with regard to increasing women's participation in science, but also the government, that is the Department of Science and Technology, DST, DBT, have also working in terms of bringing about gender sensitive or gender inclusive policies in terms of increasing gender diversity in the field of science and technology and mathematics. And with this, with the gamut of these kind of questions that the program of certificate, this program was conceptualized. And what does this program offer? I know our learners have been registered for this program, and this program aims to provide a unique opportunity to research scholars, scientists, policymakers, development professionals to critically engage with interdisciplinary fields. Like when I'm talking about interdisciplinary field, I realize that, the gender is also complex in its own subject. So also scientific establishment, science itself is complex. So how to bring about this intersection between gender and science is something that has been debated and interrogated in this particular program, and through the work of various feminist scholars like Dorothy Smith, her work on institutional ethnography, Donna Haraway with her work on situated knowledge, then Sandra Hadding when she bring about the concept of strong objectivity in making knowledge more gender inclusive in nature and less partial in nature. And the program has been designed to provide a holistic understanding of gender in science by covering basic concepts of gender, science and technology interface. So when we are talking about gender, science and technology interface, we are going to here talking about, the interface has been contextualized in relation to ecology, in relation to agricultural technologies, like the contribution of farm women in terms of access to credit, access to market, access to technology, how to upskill them, and what is their contribution in terms of when we are more leading towards feminization of agriculture. Like women are taking care of farming, forest, the water resources, and also animal husbandry. Like in Odisha, but the contribution of women as animal sakhi, like Pasu Sakhi in Odia, they have immense contribution in terms of bringing about animal husbandry into action at the grassroots level. So when we are talking about technology, so one way is to look at the technology interface in sectors like agriculture. And similarly, we are also looking at women's contribution to science, technology and innovation, and also in the context of new age technology, where we are looking at ICT, like to what extent gender digital divide exists at the global sphere, so also in Indian context, and also what is the role of renewable energy technology when we are talking about like women as not as the end users of technology only, but they can be energy entrepreneurs also. They can be innovators, and they equally participate in the dissemination of technology. So the learning outcomes are that to impart theoretical concepts of science from a gender lens, from a feminist perspective, to enrich capacity of learners with regard to policies, programs and schemes related to girls, women and science, and to enable learners to critically engage with feminist science studies in areas of STEM, ecology, health, agriculture, climate change, so on and so forth. So these are some of the critical aspects we are also looking at or discussing in this program. Also understanding, critically engaging with the concept of disability, with the concept of mental health, sexuality, gender identities, so and intersectionality. So what is the program structure? As you may be aware, some of our learners, you may be aware that the program is for 18 credits, and you can have 3 courses, that is BGS 002, Gender, Science, Technology and Society, BGS 003, Socio-Political Dimensions of Gender in Science, and the last course is BGS 004, that is Gendered Perspectives on Health. So each of these courses will have 6 credit each. and you have to complete total of 18 credits. So in BGS 002, the total blocks, there are 5 blocks dedicated, like the course has been segregated into 5 components or 5 theoretical or conceptual or analytical themes. The block 1 is about introduction to gender and science. The block 2 is about historical and theoretical context. And block 3 is all about women and local knowledge. So when we are talking about Indian knowledge system, as per NEP guidelines of NEP 2020, it is talking about how do we really look at or incorporate Indian knowledge system into the pedagogy or teaching learning. So a small component of indigenous, the local knowledge system, particularly in the aspect of health and well-being, how do we conceptualize health and what is the difference between health and well-being, having a comprehensive perspective of women's health, and also the healing practices, farming and food production, where we are looking at the local knowledge system or the ecological knowledge system in a particular context. And those the experiences of women and various case studies have also been explained in these units. And the last one is environment, climate and energy, where the focus was on women's participation in not only in terms of conserving ecology, but at the same time it is also reflecting women's voice and also women as active agents of change when we are talking about mitigation and adaptation strategies with regard to climate change and disseminating renewable energy technologies. So here, what are the key points of this particular course? Mainly we are going to discuss in relation to each of these blocks broadly. So the broad points which have been covered in this particular course include how notions of femininity and masculinity shape gender roles, because it's very important. Unless and until we define gender, we understand whether gender is a social fact or is socially constructed, and how does femininity and masculinity are so enmeshed or deeply entrenched in the societal socialization process or social norms. It is it becomes difficult for any learners to understand gender as an analytical category in relation to science or in the context of science. And therefore, these concepts like gender roles, gender stereotypes, gender socialization, masculinity, femininity, gender power relations have been discussed conceptually in this particular course. Gender and power relations persist across caste, class, ethnicity and other institutions, which reflects the concept of intersectionality. So it's not about representation of women in scientific institution or in science, in their participation in science career, but in relation to also the question of caste, women of which caste and community, women of which ethnicity you have a chance or are occupying the marginal position vis-a-vis the dominating position in scientific establishment or institutions. And knowledge production is not gender neutral in nature. Therefore, it has been interrogated that how, like the way science is not gender neutral, so also the process of knowledge production is also not neutral. How scientists and feminists have engaged with the question of gender, that is women's nature or role is not innate, and therefore technology became the agency through which gender stereotype attitudes have also been expressed. For example, when we are looking at technology, even the feminist scholars through their work have also looked at the question of childbirth, medicalization of childbirth and marginalization of women from the experience of childbirth, because it has become, medicalization has led to a kind of isolation of women in the process of childbirth. Similarly, the mechanization of housework. So even if we have scholars have worked on mechanization of housework in the West and also in India, where it is the domestic technology. So does domestic technology has liberated women from the housework? No, it has not been, but rather it particular technology has also reinforced a particular kind of gender stereotype. So here it is not about technology can be enabling factor for women's empowerment, women's participation in science and technology, but at the same time it can also reflect or reinforce a kind of mindset or patriarchal mindset, and which you could see and observe in your day-to-day life, in the advertisements, in newspapers, so on and so forth. And therefore, it says that technology became the agency through which gender stereotype and attitudes have been expressed. And the best example I could give is the example of the new reproductive technology or the assisted reproductive technology. There are multiple paradigms and worldviews in which science develops. The Enlightenment in the 18th century was a turning point celebrating a new age of reason, objectivity and criticality. And that was the growth. That was the growth of positivism. That was the growth of new age science, where this reason became the central to scientific fact. The difference between science and common sense knowledge also began to develop during the period of Enlightenment, or what you can see in the text, in the self-learning material as the period of Renaissance. Like Londa Schinberg states, in the history of science, the understanding of human evolution was all about the evolution of man. Like when you look at the history of science, whether it is the textbook in biology or in any other subject, psychology, so it's all about the evolution of human being, was all about the evolution of man. And we move on to the next block, that is block 4 and 5, where it is looking at women science technology workplace. It is more contemporary. The data has been contextualized in the contemporary context of India and in the global context. And the last block looks at feminism and science. So here, what are the key points? Like the gender divide in the sphere of technology has impacted on the digital divides across region and demographies. And gender gaps in access to STEM education and careers has been a reality. So for example, when we are talking about gender gap, so what is the percentage of women scientists who are in the leadership position? How many of them globally, women who are the, let's say, founder or co-founder of startups, or the CEOs of different corporate, or heading the corporate houses, or part of the corporate board. So when we hear, there are concepts like this in this particular course, the concepts like gender segregation in science, like occupational barriers, then the horizontal gender segregation, vertical gender segregation, question of leadership in women in science, these concepts, and also the critical, how to build a critical mass in terms of in the decision making is something that has been also looked into in this, or discussed in this particular course. And key principles of alternative methodology of doing science is like reclaiming feminist principles, what Sumi Krishna writes about reclaiming the feminist principles, like alternative way of viewing the knowledge construction, or what is the alternative framework what we can offer in the construction of new knowledge, and how we see and interpret any context or social reality. For example, any science or scientific fact is always been can be interpreted in relation to society. Therefore, the science and society cannot be seen in isolation. Rather, gender science and society, can be viewed or interpreted in a particular context, in a particular age, in a particular region, in relation to a particular community, so on and so forth. And then we come to the next course, that is BGS 003, where we are, that is the Sociopolitical Dimensions of Gender in Science, the course name is. It is talking about, it has again 6 blocks: Women in Science Education, Indian Policies and Programs, Women in Industrial Sectors. So what are the key points of BGS 003? It looks into the importance of science communications. So here when we are talking about, even DST is working on science communication, or we can discuss like the idea of science literacy. So unless and like how to build a people science movement in India is something, it's important. Like it has been, people science movement has been there in states like Kerala. So it's so important how to encourage the common mass to build a kind of, how to communicate science to the masses. Maybe with the help of folk media, maybe with the help of policies, with the help of radio, or with the help of people science movement. So it's very important that how to create a critical mass in relation to science communication. And also the course is also looking at gender as an occupational barrier in doing science. Like you have the different policies, like National Policy for Women, Empowerment of Women in 2001, the 6th 5-year plan, 10th 5-year plan, Science Technology Policy 2003, and also the Science Technology Policy 2020 is also there. Biotechnology Career Advancement and Reorientation Program, that is BioCare 2010, Science Technology and Innovation Policy 2013, 12th 5-year plan, and all the schemes have been clubbed together under Kiran, that is knowledge involvement in research advancement through nurturing. And now DST has the program on Gati, that is gender advancement program across institutions. And block 4, you are having current global debates, and block 5, emerging debates in gender and science. So it is again looking at gender and science question in relation to international platforms, and what is the global pattern in terms of women's access, participation and retention of women in science. And second point is what are the critical debates when we are discussing about gender and science as complex subjects or complex phenomena, in the pedagogy when we are transacting through the distance open and distance learning platform or mode. So here the key points of this course looks at women still represent just 29% of the researchers globally. Only 3% of Nobel Prizes for science have been awarded to women. Where is the gender gap internationally? So internationally, you could see the gender gap is there in terms of citation, in terms of research, and in terms of getting like as recipients of fellowships, prestigious fellowships and awards, and also Nobel Prizes. And question of mentorship network and role models have been they are the effective strategies when we are talking about bridging the gender gap internationally and looking at women's position in different industries. So when we are talking about industries, here in the course we discuss about health industries, then the small scale industries where you could see women's participation, more women's participation in small scale industries, and also agriculture. So agri industries. So these industries have also been looked at as workplaces. And intersectionality debates within science, how to bring about diversity in relation to caste, class, sexuality, disability, ethnicity, when we are talking about intersectionality in gender, in science. And the last course we are going to discuss over here is, quickly we will just go through it, that is BGS 004, and this last course is completely dedicated to the course is on health. So it is the gender perspectives on health. So it has actually helped us to build a kind of understanding on medical research and education in relation to existing gender bias, and what are the discriminatory practices are there in modern science and nutrition. And here also it is talking about non-normative sexual identities and in terms of their access to healthcare services, which is very important. And gender health illness, where we are talking about women-specific illness, immunization and vaccines, and sexually transmitted diseases, also reproductive health. And what are the key points here is that gender bias in various components of medical research, as clinical trials, contraceptive research and vaccines, have been very important. Like, when you read some of the work on COVID-19 vaccines and its impact on women's health, and you would see that, there is a increasing amount of research in terms of in this particular area. Healthcare and non-normative genders in terms of access to healthcare services, both primary and the community care services, and how girls are eliminated at the conception phase, like the question of the practice of female infanticide, and in Indian communities there is a lot of societal pressure to have a male child. So these questions have also been important when we are looking at women's health. And then the course also focuses on intersection between gender, mental health and care question. And are we talking about women's health when we are talking about discussing about gender and mental health issues? And lastly, disability, reproduction and masculinity. And quickly we can just end our session with the evaluation. So these are 3 courses. We have discussed about the key points of these 3 courses. And now we are coming to the concluding part of our session, that is evaluation. We have continuous assessment and also term and examination both. So assignments are already uploaded, and the new assignments will be uploaded in the 3rd week or the last week of July. So those who would like to appear for the assignment, you can appear and submit the assignment before July, or else you can, those who would want to go for term and examination, I would advise them to quickly attempt the assignments. Plagiarized assignments are not evaluated, and handwritten scanned copy assignments to be submitted through the RCs, regional centers, or the nodal regional centers, because assignments coming through, directly coming to the school, it is always advisable that you rotate the assignment through your nodal RCs. That would be more adequate or the correct way of submitting. And also you can submit the physical copy of the assignment in the Department of Gender and Development Studies. So examinations are held in every semester, like twice in a year, in the month of June and in the month of December. So I am Dr. Sunita Dhal, the program coordinator. Along with me, Professor Savita Singh is the co-coordinator for this program, and you can reach out to both of us through our email. With this, I thank and have a good day. Thank you.